Hello. This is a presentation we delivered at a conference in Bretagne, France, the LACITO conference on April 22nd, 2026. You'll be hearing from three presenters today, so we thought we'd start by introducing ourselves. My name is Andrew Walsh. I'm an anthropologist at the University of Western Ontario, and I've been working in Madagascar for a long time now. In recent years, since 2008, I've been working closely with colleagues and students at the University of Antsiranana on a variety of projects. Most recently, the one that you're gonna hear about here. One of the great pleasures of this work is getting to work with and meet the region's next leaders, including my colleague Hortensia, who you will hear from now.
Hello, my name is Hortensia. Yes, I'm one of the students. I'm an alumni of the exchange program between the University of Antsiranana and the University of Western Ontario Anthropology Environmental. And I am now become a co-founder of an NGO called BNC, Bubom Nature Conservation. So what I'm going to present today is our approach with the community of Bubombi.
Hello, I'm Emilio, one of the 6 students who participated to this project, which brought us to Bubong last year.
As you can see from this slide, the kind of work we've been doing over the years has involved a great deal of collaborating. And as you can imagine, this has also involved a lot of translating, not just translating language so that English, French, and Malagasy speakers can make sense of one another's words, but also translating perspectives and ontologies to ensure that these words are actually meaningful. This challenge was particularly striking in 2024 when colleagues with the University of Antsiranana and I supervised teams of Canadian and Malagasy students in carrying out a survey of residents of Bobombi. Now, you're going to be hearing Bobombi a lot in this presentation, so let me just show you where Bobombi is. Bobombi is this region at the far northern tip of Madagascar. You can see it here in this small inset in this map. Now, our goal with the survey that we did in 2024 was to see how local experiences and understandings of climate change compared with those noted in a 2023 Afrobarometer report that described Madagascar's population as being among the most climate change aware and climate change literate in Africa. To be clear, being climate change aware means being aware of changes in the climate over recent decades. Being climate change literate, on the other hand, means both being aware of the changes in the climate and knowledgeable of its human causes. Put differently, as defined in a recently published overview in Nature, climate change literacy encompasses being aware of both climate change and its anthropogenic causes. And this is where we ran into an important translation dilemma. Just what do advocates of climate literacy mean by the term anthropogenic? And how might this differ from other ways of thinking about how humans cause things to happen? Thanks to the survey, we learned that residents of Bobombi are unquestionably climate change aware, with all but 2 of the 32 people we spoke with reporting increasingly frequent droughts and flooding over the past decade. Whether or not they were climate change literate, however, was another question. Most respondents thought that the increasing droughts and flooding of recent decades were in fact caused by people, thus supporting Afrobarometer's assessment of Malagasy people as actually being quite climate change literate. Unlike the Afrobarometer survey, however, which is based on quantifiable yes-no answers, our survey dug a little deeper. And when we asked people how people cause climate change, most respondents in Bobombi pointed to the disrespect of taboos against working the land on certain days or on roofing houses with corrugated metal. They attributed it to the abandonment of certain rituals meant to guarantee good weather for growing rice, and a variety of other indicators of a general lack of respect for what in Malagasy are called fumbandazanga, or ancestral customs. Put differently, the people we surveyed recognized that climate change has human causes, but not in a way that would lead most to label them as climate change literate. As the anthropologist Peter Rudyard Gould noted years ago in work addressing how people in the Marshall Islands understand climate change in much the way I just described. Researchers who embrace what he called the industrial blame understanding of climate change are often troubled by the fact that many of the people we work with in the global south blame themselves and their neighbors for how climate change is affecting them. To my students and I, certainly, it just didn't seem right, neither correct nor fair, that people in Bobombi should take any of the blame, let alone blame themselves for what is so clearly not their fault. And yet, this is just what we found. That is, people who accepted climate change as anthropogenic, just not at all in the way we thought they should. According to the Nature article just cited, climate change literacy matters because it is what underpins informed mitigation and adaptation responses. This in mind, the case of Bobombi presents something of a puzzle. Here we have people who are in one sense very well informed in recognizing that since it is people who are the cause of climate change, responding to climate change will require that people change their ways. In another sense, however, they are not well informed in that their understanding of the anthropogenic nature of climate change would be considered wrong or false by many global observers. This puzzle is nicely illustrated by another finding from the Afrobarometer survey cited earlier. While Malagasy people were top of the list of 39 African populations to note that climate change was making life worse, they were also the only population surveyed in which a majority of respondents felt that primary responsibility for limiting climate change should be attributed to citizens, that is, Malagasy people, rather than government, rich or developed countries, or business or industry. Now, the survey we carried out in 2024 was meant ultimately to inform BNC's plans for supporting their own mitigation and adaptation responses in Bobombi. Unlike my students and me, however, for BNC, local understandings of climate change and its causes are more than abstract puzzles to ponder while decrying the injustice of it all. For BNC, local understandings of climate change, its human causes, and its impacts are very real and consequential, not least in how they shape people's engagement with one another and the region's changing environment. For BNC, then, the next step was to move from documenting residents' understandings of climate change to consulting these same people on what might be done about it. And this is where I turn things over to Hortensia.
Thank you, Professor Andrews. From the start, BNC worked with the community in Bobombi as prioritized the perspective and input from the community we work. In our conservation effort, our approach is not to blame local people for not following so-called correct behavior. Instead, we recognize that environmental change has brought change in people's behavior and practice. This shift involve local knowledge and language related to animals, trees, forests, and changing ways of interacting with the natural environment. BNC's role is therefore much about learning from the community in Bobombi as it is about sharing knowledge with them. In recognizing and respecting local knowledge and perception, our approach begins by accepting this belief. For us, there is nothing to gain by convincing people that they are wrong in how they think about the cause of climate change. People in Bobombi clearly perceive that something is going wrong and understand that change is necessary. So climate change is not only as a challenge, but also as an opportunity to support the restoration of what communities feel has been lost, particularly traditional ways of relating to the environment and to one another. This is why we decided to follow up the survey Andrew has just discussed by hosting a dialogue in the community of Angiabe in May 2025 in partnership with the NGO called Miarteko. We begin by discussing climate change itself. We have heard many of things Andrew have already described about the climate impact and the causes. This dialogue was not just about climate change. It was about cultural loss, identity, and collective responsibility. It provides evidence of both language loss and innovation for younger generation within this shifting context. and we are not in a position to propose technical fixes to the climate change. The climate change we are caused by the climate change. This is why we have been working with the community in the region. This is not to romanticize the past or to resist progress, but rather to reclaim wisdom, the local legitimacy, and that offer deeply trusted way of living in balance with the environment. After that, we have done a student of the university with Andrew Walsh again. This time, the goal of the research was not to study further local understanding of climate change, but to focus on documenting ecosystem, the change, and the language to describe it. While at the same time, we are placing the student as positioning as learners and the community members as teachers. Students learn directly from the elders about the region's changing ecosystem, while also collecting vocabulary, expression, and story used to describe plants and the environmental process through working interview in the forest. This working interview allows students not only to observe ecosystem, but also to capture the language used to describe it, as well as the name of species in the dialect of Malagasy language spoken in Bubaung. For villagers, it was the way to ensure that the name of plants, their meaning, and their uses are not forgotten, but instead documented and passed through generations. This was not only about identifying species, but transmitting language, knowledge, and memory. These villagers are not simply named plants, they were teaching students how to see, understand, and speak about forest. We were wanting them to learn to read the forest. To conclude, where some might have focused on trying to make residents of Bubon more climate literate by teaching them to think differently about climate change, we wonder what might be accomplished by encouraging some of the region's future leaders to become forest literate. Now we'll turn things over to the students who will tell you about their work in the site. Emilio.
Yes. Although Bubawumbe is located on 59 kilometers from Diego and 2 hours on board from the campus of university, none of us has been there before. The objective of our stay is not only to study how important the biodiversity is for the community member, but also to understand how local people interact with their environment. So what did we do there? During our visit, we conducted interviews to elders which called reminding about how people use and value plants life in their daily lives. We also explored the forest with guide to learn about local flora and its importance. This allowed us to connect the theoretical knowledge with real life experiences. What we have learned from these experiences, we learned that biodiversity is essential for daily life in Anziabe. For example, plants are used for building and food, like the case of kark. Okay, which is used to make mats and hats. They also use plant for medicine. For example, the plant called mandravasar, which means abolish the difficulties, is used stubborn illness such as sinusite and chronic cough. We also discovered that some plants have cultural and spiritual value. For instance, the tamarind tree known as Madir is considered sacred and plays a role in ceremonies. This shows that environmental knowledge is deeply connected to culture. What did we do after our visit? Following our returns to campus, we presented our findings to other students. We shared our findings with them. We emphasized that these experiences really changed our perspective. We learned humility and understood that knowledge does not only come from textbooks, but also from communities.
Okay, thanks, Emilio. Um, as you can see, we've really only just begun to explore the possibilities of flipping the script of traditional climate change literacy training and awareness raising by having students learn how to, as Hortensia put it, read the forest in the manner of people in Bobombi. I'm happy to conclude by noting that we are not finished. In fact, in a year's time, we will be continuing this work on a much larger scale as part of a new collaboration that will see students collaborate further with communities in the region to develop alternatives to conventional awareness-raising campaigns and strategies. We aren't yet sure what these alternatives will look like, but given the insights, relationships, and better understandings generated through the work described in this presentation, we see great value in going forward with the approach we've outlined. That is an approach that both attends to the significance of local understandings of the anthropogenic and while at the same time valorizes more than just one kind of literacy.
Yeah, to conclude our presentation, as an NGO, we are looking forward to lasting collaboration, and we are open to any institution for possible collaboration. Thank you. That's it.
Okay.
Have we recording our face or just?
No. Mostly just a voice. It was
Voice.
just at the beginning that it recorded our faces. So I'm going to stop the recording.